China and the United States are permanent members of the UN Security Council, which bears a primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. China and the United States are two leading world economies that have become closely intertwined over the past 40 years, independent and mutually complementary. Any complications or tensions between China and the United States negatively affect the global economy.
And there's a proverb in Southeastern Asia countries that the two elephants are fighting and they damage the garden, the grass of the garden. So from this perspective, China does not want to have such a fight. But if somebody find us to provoke us to be engaged in such a fight, we have to respond to that.
So basically speaking, we need to truly manage the strategic competition. It will be dependent upon will we view this bilateral relations realistically and deal with the strategic competition in a appropriate manner and set up a framework of stability. So the true meaning of that framework is to rebalance the bilateral relationship in terms of strategies,
but rather find mutually agreeable multilateral ways to address problems in the technological world. The two largest economies in the world, in my opinion, need to work together. I think we are coupled, and to me, decoupling is not a viable option. I also think that we should de-escalate the increase of bans on student and official travel and limiting the travel and work of journalists. You know, I've always found in my diplomatic career that an important way to create mutual understanding between persons from different backgrounds is to visit and study each other's countries.
In his research. And what I want to say is that China is still one of the multipolarity. It's not one of the bipolarity. So I think the bipolarity does not fit the current realism or does not fit the current situation. We still have a multipolarism. Bipolarity is not a stable structure for the future.
China and the European Union will remain rivals, but they need to cooperate. That's the nature of the modern international system. And of course, as was mentioned by Susan earlier, avoiding a decoupling is absolutely essential, even if such a decoupling is difficult to imagine, quite frankly. It would be unwise to be too optimistic and just assume that the nightmare scenarios cannot develop. Some of the actions taken might lead to this direction, so we need to be vigilant. So, looking at the rivalry of China, United States, the basic goal is set out by President Macron, by Mr. Borrell, Mrs. von der Leyen, the Geopolitical Commission she's spoken of. The basic goal of the European leadership is strategic autonomy.
I actually think that the system we're about to enter is going to be relatively peaceful. And again, I'm not in the consensus here. But there are two major reasons I believe that. First, under emerging bipolarity, we have a system which is bipolar, stable. It'll be a version of bipolarity unlike US-Soviet, which focuses on economic balancing. Economic balancing is just much, much, much less dangerous than military balancing that we saw between the United States and the Soviet Union. That's good news. And finally, and China doesn't have a formal crisis management apparatus, again, from what I know. A lot of work to be done. I do think that if there's a change in president, public health, climate, arms control, crisis management, all could be areas of fruitful cooperation. Emerging bipolarity, I think, will add to U.S.-China tensions, but surprisingly creates the chance for a more peaceful future.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so if COVID-19 is an enemy of China, COVID-19 is an enemy of United States, frankly, United States and China should at least, during the period of COVID-19,
Trump's China policy is increasingly disconnected from the mainstream policy community in the United States. In particular, this regime change-oriented strategy that Secretary of State Pompeo outlined in his speech at the Nixon Library several weeks ago. That does not have widespread support in either Democratic or Republican Party circles. But Trump's China policy is also disconnected from the business community, who have concerns about market access, have concerns about technology competition, but they're focused much more on risk mitigation than decoupling, and they want guardrails, they don't want confrontation in the economic relationship.
Reach an equal and mutual respect situation. In bilateral trade, climate change, the third-party collaborations, in all those areas we have a lot of space for cooperation. Moreover, compared to the US, EU with regards to China, they view China as a collaborative partner instead of a strategic competition.
China does not pose an existential threat to Americans, our country, or our way of life. Characterizing the relationship as a strategic competition lessens both countries' ability to cooperate on issues on which we disagree. Would the leadership of both countries be more or less willing to listen to a partner or strategic competitor?
Is that in the recent months, in the border issues, China is trying to solve this peacefully so that we can find a fair and acceptable resolution for both parties. So this is still our principle. We do not see India as our enemy, and that is our major direction, and that has not changed. And China will not come back at any enemy proportionally. So we still remain friendly and kind to India. So that is still our basic standing.
My worry is the coming fourth industrial revolution. Now this is the revolution which is software driven, which will be opaque, mostly non-verifiable, because it has a lot of capabilities which can be transferred to the military and which can transform the character of war.
There's been a lot of discussion on the Chinese side, not just in this forum, but in many forums, devoted to the wrong actions of the United States, not just under Trump, but under previous administrations as well, that contributed to today's US-China problems. But it is imperative that the Chinese side take a hard look at its own policies and behaviors. I think if China doesn't want to end up in a Thucydides trap, then it should consider actions that will help the established power, i.e. the US, to make the transition, just as US took actions to facilitate China's participation in the system. The 21st century is going to call for new thinking, and the problems of this century, terrorism, financial crisis, pandemic disease that we've already seen.
Both sides need to adapt to each other, adapt to a new China and a new United States.
For the foreseeable future, it will be a period of adjustment. We need to adjust to each other. So we need the fourth referendum or the fourth communiques. So that is, we need the fourth or even the fifth communiques. We need to have the bottom lines. The bottom line is we should not have war. We should not have armed conflicts. That would be a disaster for the humankind, not just for the two countries. China and the US needs to coexist in a competitive way. We need to recognize that we do have a strategic competition going on in between the two countries, but it is not a Cold War. Cold War is exclusive. It does not fit our current situation. If we need to use the phrase Cold War to describe the China-US competition, it is actually a trap set by the hawkish people that intends to make us remember or remind people of the Cold War era. and to put pressure on the major power. That would be very dangerous. So in our competitive or the competition, we need to set the edge, and we should not cover the table. We should not flip the table. So we need to coexist in So one thing is that the international architecture is not just an issue of a comparison of powers. So yes, China and the US are major countries in terms of economy, but to make a judgment about whether the world is bipolarity or multilateralism, it's not just about economy, but about the relationships or dynamics between us. That's the first point. The second is that as of now, well, when it comes to Russia, we don't know which polar are they. So we talked about EU by Madame Ren Jing, that the EU is not picking sides, they're independent. So there are also other forces and other powers in the world. So today, I think it is very unlikely to have a situation like the past when we have a bipolarity. So we are evolving more toward multipolarism.
Keeping covering the military exercise, however, the military circle are quite low profile. So that's why I say that now a political measure is still prevailing. The United States is having its presidential election, and China is faced with the post-epidemic economic development, and we are still trying to recover from the impact of the pandemic.